Hello there and welcome. In this video we're going to be looking at why your pond fish are dying, or why they have already died. And this is going to include both koi and goldfish, because the topics I'm going to discuss will affect both of these types of fish. Now I'm going to break this video down into three parts, because there are three kind of different areas of why fish will die in your pond, but they can overlap and one thing can actually lead to another. I'm going to start off with water quality. Now water quality is a big factor when it comes to your pond fish. A lot of people have a tendency to ignore water quality actually in their ponds, whereas in an aquarium you'll be monitoring your water quality fairly frequently, doing good water changes. Unfortunately, there's a tendency to ignore ponds and just kind of let them do their own thing. As long as the water stays clear, you're kind of content to think that your water quality is actually quite good. But this couldn't be further from the truth a lot of the times. Just because water is clear does not mean that it is good quality. So let's start with one of the major reasons why your fish will die, and this is more in the summertime when temperatures are hot, but it can actually strike at any point, and that is lack of oxygen. Now obviously fish need oxygen to breathe, and when there isn't enough oxygen in your pond, your fish will die because they will suffocate. In warmer temperatures, there is less oxygen dissolved in your water, and your fish can actually suffocate. So in the summer months, what you need to do is actually have an air stone or a fountain or some kind of waterfall or something similar, just to keep the oxygen levels up in your pond, keep your water turning over. Otherwise what will happen is they will actually start to come to the surface, start gasping for breath, and if things aren't resolved, they will die. Now, lack of oxygen can also be caused by something called an algae bloom. So basically this is when algae suddenly decides to grow from one factor or another, probably due to increased nutrients. Your pond will go green, or you'll get a massive amount of something like blanket weed, and that will suck out all of the oxygen from the water, and your fish will die from lack of oxygen in that way. Now this leads me on to actually lack of filtration, which is also a factor in lack of oxygen in the pond, but is in its own right something that you need to be aware of. Now filtration has a big part in keeping your fish healthy. It is the heart of your pond. It will break down all the waste that your fish produce, and obviously any food that isn't eaten or is rotting in your pond, any leaves that fall into your pond, things like that. Your filter is what is going to break it down and keep the water quality good. Now everything your fish eats comes out the other end, and it comes out in an organic form, and that form is actually toxic. It's called ammonia, and it binds to the fish's gills and stops your fish being able to breathe. Now in a healthy pond with a good mature filter, the ammonia is quickly broken down into nitrite and then into nitrate, and it doesn't actually affect your fish in a negative way because it is now in a safe, stable form of nitrate. Now in ponds where there are too many fish, or the filter is new, or in fact sometimes a lot of people don't actually run a filter, this process doesn't really happen, or it doesn't happen quickly enough, and your fish will end up at the surface of the water. They'll often be on their sides gasping for breath, and this is because the ammonia has gone really high. I would probably say the second biggest killer of fish, other than lack of oxygen due to temperatures, I've already discussed, is actually high ammonia levels. And this is very common in the colder months, such as spring or winter, where your pond bacteria actually isn't working very well. You'll find that if you keep feeding your fish, the fish food will break down into ammonia, and you'll get a huge spike, and a lot of your fish will die. And that's one of the common reasons why fish die over the winter, in fact, is due to the fact that people don't stop feeding them. So if your fish are looking like they're on their sides or they're gasping at the surface, and you've ruled out the fact that it's not just simply lack of oxygen, then do an ammonia test on your pond, and if you find ammonia, then you need to add an ammonia remover and increase your filter and the filter bacteria. Now another reason why your fish could be gasping at the surface or laying on their sides looking very ill, possibly already dead, is actually something like pesticides. Now lots of people use pesticides and herbicides on their garden, and many of them are absolutely toxic to aquatic life. Now if you've just recently put some moss away or something on your lawn, or you sprayed your plants with pesticides, this can easily make its way into your pond system and will kill your aquatic life very, very very quickly. Now, if this is happening to you, you need to remove your fish from your pond immediately. Add some dechlorinator or something that can normally help to break down some of the pesticides, and put them into some fresh water with huge amounts of oxygen, and hopefully they will come round. But if your fish are already dead and you have no idea why, your water quality is perfect, your oxygen levels is perfect, then it could be something like a pesticide or a herbicide has got into your pond. So the next sort of chapter in this video is going to be discussing diseases. Now, diseases are a bit of a funny one because they can actually be brought on by stress from the things I've already mentioned in the first part. So diseases don't always just come on their own. They're normally triggered because a healthy fish has a strong immune system and tends to not be affected by things like flukes, bacteria and other things like that. But it's normally when their immune system is lowered due to a stressor that they tend to get these diseases, but not always. So things like flukes and parasites can actually be brought in from when you add new fish to your pond, or they can sometimes be brought in by other things like birds from ponds that have got an infection. So it's something that you need to watch out for. Now, flukes and parasites aren't always apparent on your fish. They will often be almost undetectable, and sometimes you have to do something called a scale scrape, and that's where you scrape your pond fish, then you look at it under a microscope and you'll see what kind of flukes or parasites are on the fish. Now, flukes and parasites are bad for your fish because they'll actually weaken the fish. They tend to be an irritant on the fish's scales, but they will also be removing nutrients from the fish themselves, causing it to weaken, causing it to not be able to use all of the energy in its body, and they'll just generally get weaker and weaker. And normally, once there's a parasite on a fish, their immune system will go down, and then they'll actually start getting other things like ulcers. They'll start getting secondary bacterial infections, and it's kind of bad news from then on in. So you really need to be in tune with your fish. Have a look at it. If they have any signs of milkiness on their scales, or they've got patches of discoloration, or even if they're breathing heavily or flicking on rockwork and things in your pond, then you need to actually have a look at them and see if they've got any parasites or flukes on their scales. There's lots of treatments to get rid of the flukes and parasites. It's a very easily treatable thing, but you need to actually make sure you do it before it gets out of hand, because it can cause very fast and sudden wipeouts of ponds if you don't catch it quickly enough. And normally things like ulcers are actually secondary infections from flukes. So the fluke will sit on the scales, it will do its thing, then the wound that the fluke's causing will get infected by a bacteria, and then the bacteria will start to eat away at the fish, causing the ulcers. So lastly, and the third point I'd like to make about why your fish have died or are actually disappearing, is predation. Now, predation happens on ponds very, very frequently, and the main culprit is this fellow here, your friendly neighbourhood heron. But there are other things that can predate on your fish, such as cats, dogs. You get quite a lot of otters are now in the UK, and they're going into ponds finding an easy meal. Unfortunately, or fortunately, most of these creatures are actually protected by law, in the UK at least anyway, so you can't go out and shoot your heron or your otters or anything like that. Even your cat, don't go out and shoot that. You have to just protect your fish, identify the predator that is coming in. Even things like kingfishers can be a nuisance if you're near a river. So the biggest way of doing this is to add things like netting to your pond, or you can get tiles that go around the edge that stop the heron from actually entering your pond. But normally it's a combination of deterrents that you need to do. There's electric fences you can put around the pond, and that stops otters from going in there. But it is normally a combination. Once you've identified your threat, you need to then take the appropriate measures. So thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful. I hope that you've managed to identify why your fish have died or are dying, and you are able to then rectify the situation. If you want to see more of this kind of content, please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Once again, thank you for watching, and happy fish keeping!